Some men don't die from bullets. They die from keeping quiet when the world needs a word said out loud. That thought rode the wash beside Boone Callahan, as steady as his bay gelding. Dead Man Wash was bone dry and mean. A cottonwood leaned over it like an old judge, and under one low limb something hung wrong. Burlap. Torn, stained dark near the bottom, the kind of thing a wise man rides past. Boone reined in. No birds broke it, no dogs barked. Then he heard it, not a scream, not even a cry, just breath, thin and ragged, the kind that clings to life because it doesn't know how to quit. He ground-tied the bay and walked in. The sack wasn't tied right, half a knot, half a toss, and someone had thrown a thin blanket over it like a lie. He eased the blanket back with 2 fingers. A young woman stared up through a tangle of dust and hair. 20, maybe a shade more. Lips split, skin gone to leather, one wrist ringed with rust where wire had bit her raw. Her eyes were past fear and past asking. What came out of her mouth was no louder than a moth. "Just kill me fast." Boone stopped breathing. The world went small and bright and still. He set his hat back a notch. "Not today," he said. He slid the canteen under her chin. "Sip." She tried. Most of the water went missing, but a little made it in. He cut the wire mark with his pocket knife and wrapped the wrist in a strip from his shirt. She watched his hands like a wild thing that hadn't decided yet. "Name?" he asked. Her mouth shaped one, then let it go. He nodded anyway. Names could come later. He checked the ground without moving his boots much. 2 shod horses, one with a nicked hind shoe. Boot prints with a long stride, a drag mark where the sack had swung, fresh but not close. He took the blanket, shook the worst of the dirt, and tucked it around her. "Easy now." He lifted her like a man lifts what he plans to keep. She was light as a coil of rope and twice as worn. He set her side saddle in front of him, his coat around her shoulders, his left arm firm like a fence rail. The bay shifted and settled. "You hold if you can," he said. "If you can't, I'll hold for both of us." Her head rested once against his chest, barely there. He felt the touch through dust and denim like a church bell from far off. Boone looked once at the cottonwood. The burlap sack swung slow on the limb, empty now, refusing to forget what it had been asked to do. He cut it down, folded it flat, and stowed it behind the saddle horn. Things left hanging have a way of drawing coyotes. He turned the gelding toward Coyote Springs. The line of low hills lay ahead, like shoulders under a blanket. Far off, his porch would gripe like an old-timer when a man stepped on it. There'd be water to warm, bread to soften, a stove to wake. He nudged the bay to a steady lope. Behind him, the wash kept its secrets. In front of him, a roof needed to mean more than shade. The woman's breath ticked small and stubborn against his shirt, counting out a promise he hadn't made yet but would have to keep. "Stay with me," he said, quiet as a vow. The bay stretched into the flats. Boone didn't look back. He set his jaw and rode for home. Coyote Springs wasn't much. A lean-to of a house, a porch that complained when a man set a boot on it, 2 chairs that never agreed with each other. Boone swung down, shouldered the door, and let the room take them both. He laid her on the pallet by the stove. The bed stood ready in the corner, but he didn't point at it. He set his hat on a peg and his gun in reach. The air smelled of old coffee and saddle soap. He built a small fire, nothing fierce, just enough to wake the iron. Water went into the kettle. A tin cup warmed on the back ring. He found a clean blanket in the trunk, shook it once, and tucked it over her to the chin. Her eyes tracked his hands, not his face. "Try the water," he said when the kettle talked. He poured slow. Small sips. She pushed herself up on one elbow. The cup trembled, tapped her teeth, but she got some down. The heat put a little color in her. He wrapped her other wrist with a strip of soft cloth and tied it neat so the knot wouldn't dig. There was bread from yesterday and a little bacon. He sliced the bread thin and soaked it in the broth he kept in a jar. He didn't use a plate, just handed her the tin and waited. "If you can hold it," he said. She did for a while. Then the kettle hissed louder than it needed to, and she flinched hard enough to slosh. He didn't move. He just took the cup, wiped the mess with a rag, and set the kettle farther back. He stepped outside for a bucket. The evening lay over the flats like a worn quilt, faded at the high places. He filled the bucket and came back in, boots quiet. He washed her face with a clean rag, careful around the cracked places, and combed the worst knots out with his fingers. He said nothing that would make a person feel smaller. When she looked toward the bed, he shook his head, gentle. "Warmth's here," he said, tapping the stove lid with a knuckle. "Rest where you like." She curled herself near the iron as if the floor knew her name. He took the old burlap sack from where he'd tied it and folded it flat, then flatter until it was only a square of trouble with the breath pressed out. He slid it behind a crate in the corner. Things that had held a person didn't need to be in plain sight. He checked the latch. He checked the back door. He checked the rifle again, though he already knew it was clean. He took the thin blanket from the chair and rolled it for her neck. She pretended not to see and let him. "Name can wait," he said. "Everything can wait." She watched the door like it might do a bad trick. Her mouth worked as if to form a word, then quit. He couldn't blame her. Talking takes strength a body doesn't have the first night. Boone ate at the table under the window. He didn't clink the spoon. He didn't scrape the tin. When he was done, he set another cup beside the first on the shelf, rim to rim, and left them there without comment. He put a pan of water by the stove in case fever came. He set his boots by the door and pulled his coat on again. The porch had a chair that leaned the wrong way. He leaned with it, rifle across his knees, hat down a little. Inside, the stove ticked as metal settled. Now and then, her breath changed and then got steady again. A coyote talked a county away, thin as thread. Boone let it pass through him and go. He didn't think about the wash. He didn't think about tracks. He thought about the way her hands had studied his when he cut the wire mark, and how a person learns the truth of a man faster by what he doesn't do. Toward midnight he stood, eased the door, and looked in. She was sleeping the way the scared sleep, light as paper, ready to run. He added 2 little sticks to keep the iron honest and eased the door shut again. "Rest," he said to no one, or to the house, or to both. "We'll see about tomorrow." He sat back down and waited on the dark until it belonged to him. Morning came level and plain. Boone split kindling in the yard, the axe head kissing the block and coming back true. The door eased open. The woman stepped out with her hair pulled back by a torn strip of cloth. She stood a while like a foal learning its legs, then reached for a log. He didn't wave her off. He set another billet on the block and slid the axe to her. She took it two-handed, shoulders tight, brought it down. The cut wasn't pretty, but the wood gave. They worked that way, his swing, her swing, no talk spent where work would do. When the stack was neat, he wiped the handle and handed it back. "Good," he said. "One word. Enough." Inside, the stove held a steady glow. Boone set 2 tin cups on the table without looking at her. Coffee went into both. He poured thin, the way a body can keep down. A slice of cornbread softened in broth followed. He ate his share. She watched, then tried. This time the spoon didn't shake much. "Doc's coming by," he said. She's plain and she's quiet." At noon, Ada Merrill rode up on a sorrel that stepped careful. She left her hat on the peg and her voice by the door. Boone stood aside. Ada knelt, warmed her hands over the stove ring, then checked the girl by lamplight, eyes, tongue, pulse, the wire cuts, the sunburn. She dabbed salve, wrapped clean cloth, and made notes on a scrap of paper torn from a receipts book. "No questions today," Ada said, looking at Boone, not the girl. "Water, broth, thyme. If fever climbs, send for me." She packed her bag, paused, and set a little corked vial on the shelf. For the worst hours, a drop, not a swallow. The woman watched every move like she was learning rules that might let her stay. When Ada left, the room held the shape of her kindness for a while, and then that too settled. Afternoon found Boone oiling the Winchester at the table. She sat on the floor near the stove, legs tucked under, eyes on his hands. He worked slow and clean, put the parts back where they belonged, wiped the stock with a square of flannel. "That camp by the wash," he said, mostly to the rifle. "It's not over." Her eyes closed like that cost less than answering. Night took its chair. Boone set the pot back on the ring, ladled out a small bowl, and added a bit of bacon more for taste than meat. He slid the bowl to her. She finished it. He put a heel of bread beside it. She finished that too. The house breathed easy wood heat. She looked at him then. Not at his hands, not at the gun on its pegs, at him. Her voice came from a long way off, but it came. "You didn't touch me." Boone kept his seat. He met her eyes and let the truth sit between them. "No, ma'am." Something let go in her shoulders. Not much. Enough to be seen. A corner of her mouth found a shape it had forgotten. Not a smile a saloon would notice. The real kind. It lasted a second and was gone, but the room kept the echo. He rinsed the bowls and set them by the cups to dry. She reached for the blanket, drew it up, and lay down by the stove the way a person lays down in a place that isn't an enemy anymore. He stirred the fire with 2 fingers worth of stick and cut the light. Before he turned away, he noticed her wrist where the bandage had slipped. Ink and heat had had their say there once. 2 crooked letters done mean, black and ugly, against the skin. T.T. Boone's jaw set. He eased the cloth back over it and tied the knot right. Then he went to the door and checked the latch a second time. Outside was whatever it was. Inside, for tonight, held. He took his chair on the porch and listened until the world thinned down to what he could carry. Morning laid everything out plain. Boone walked the south fence with a coil of wire and found what he needed to find. 2 horses had come in easy during the night, turned, and left. One hind shoe showed a nick like a chipped tooth. The rider's boots printed long, one toe dragging a hair on the step-off. He knelt, thumbed the cut in the shoe, and stood. Old Rafe eased out of the washbrush as if he'd grown there. Fox skin cap, traps slung, eyes taking in what a man misses when he's thinking about other things. "You heard anything you care to repeat?" Boone asked. Rafe spat in the dust and pointed with his chin. "Turkey shack. Cliff lean-to out past Sage Rim. Boys up there laughed too hard last night. Sound had liquor and meanness in it. Heard 'em say new stock." Boone's mouth went flat. "Names?" Vern's giggle. Dee's knife on a whetstone. Can't swear the third, but the laugh was short like a busted hinge. "Could be Matters." Boone nodded once. Obliged. Rafe hooked a thumb toward the prints. "That shoe nick'll follow a man like a burr. You catch it once more, you'll have your string." "I'll find it," Boone said. Ironwood Ridge worked like any town that had learned to mind its own business. A blacksmith's ring, a hammer here and there, talk kept to the boards. Boone tied off at the hitch and didn't ask questions. He walked slow and listened. Widow Bell at the livery said a man with a turkey track saddle had watered at noon 2 days back, horse blowing like it had been pushed. "Didn't like his eyes," she said. "They moved too much." Boone tipped his hat and crossed to the telegraph. Tansy Miller kept her hair pinned and her ledger neater than the law. She didn't look up. She didn't have to. "You want sugar in that coffee you ain't ordered?" she said. No, ma'am. She slid a scrap under her palm so the room wouldn't own it. On it, a scrawled hand. TT, Thursday, Shack 3. Below, a time and a rate code. Came through from a whistle stop with no name, she murmured. Relay man coughed right before it. I remember coughs. Boone folded the slip once and handed it back. You keep it, he said. Just needed to know it existed. She put the paper away where papers go when the world isn't ready for them yet. Careful, Boone. He stepped into the sheriff's office last. Emmett Shaw had a neat desk and a neat mustache. He read a wanted circular he didn't need to read. Sheriff, Boone said. Callahan. Boone set nothing on the desk. Tracks at my south line. Shoenick. Rafe heard talk at Turkey Shack. Telegraph's lively. There are girls gone. Shaw didn't sigh. He put the circular down corner square. No witnesses, Boone. No complaint filed. No names on paper. I stir this without a peg to hang it on. The whole town rattles. You want to panic with nothing to anchor it? I want them anchored somewhere that isn't a cliff lean-to. Bring me something I can stand on in court, Shaw said, gentle like a doctor. Until then, I got noise and I got stories. Boone looked at him a long beat. He had known men who hid behind bluster. Shaw hid behind procedure and meant it to be mercy. It still hid. Boone touched his brim. Reckon I'll go find your peg then. He turned for the door. Shaw's voice followed him a step. You move careful, Boone. Don't make me come after you. Outside, the street kept on. Boone tightened his cinch, set a toe in the stirrup, and swung up. He didn't talk to the horse. He didn't talk to himself. He headed for the flats and the line of rock that kept secrets until men made them tell. Sometimes a man's got to be the witness. He set out to be exactly that. The livery smelled of old hay and gear oil. Widow Belle Kearney led Boone through the tack room with a lamp held low. She stopped at a saddle on the wall, the kind a man parks when he plans to come back soon. See them tacks, she said. Copper, set in a double T on the fender. Not factory. A drunk with pride did that. Boone thumbed the edge. The stitching along the skirt ran thick, then thin, like a man lost the feel halfway. Whose? Vern Pike rides with that mark, Bell said. He watered here 2 days back. Horse blew hot. His laugh is a squeak. Once you hear it, you'd rather not again. Boone nodded. You recall his boots? Left heel chewed. He walks like he owes the ground money. Out on Maine, the forge threw a hard light. Ramon Ortega worked a shoe on the anvil, the hammer rising even as a heartbeat. Boone waited until the bar cooled and set a small blade on the bench. Short tang, snapped and scabbed back, with a dirty weld. Picked it up near the wash, Boone said. Ramon turned it in his fingers. Ain't a smith did this, he said. Somebody used a camp coal and hope. See these bubbles? That's a cold bead. I've fixed worse for a boy named D. Larkin. Fella likes a knife that looks meaner than it works. D runs with Vern, Boone said. Most times, Ramon said. He pointed at a faint notch on the spine. He files there to catch light, thinks it scares folks. Ramon wrapped the blade in a rag and handed it back. If this comes to court, I'll say what I just said, slow enough for any judge. Boone tipped his hat. Reckon it will. At the telegraph, Tansy Miller kept the window shade half down. She didn't speak until the room forgot he was there. Then she slid a ledger sideways with one finger. Relay from a no-name whistle, she said. On the line, someone had scrawled TT, 2, Shack, 3, and a freight rate code, X-Live, the kind warehouses use when they don't want words. X-Live, Boone said, livestock. Or anything they count like it, Tansy said. Came through at 7:42. Our bell struck 7:38. That drift matches the mountain wire. I'll swear to the time if I need to. You keep your head down, Boone said. She smiled without kindness. I always do. Boone stepped into the evening and let the pieces sit where they wanted to sit. Vern's saddle, Dee's bad weld, a code that called people freight. Somewhere behind all that, a bookman kept the numbers straight and the hands dirtier than his own. "Clay matters," Widow Bell said later, when Boone asked at her counter for a sack of oats he didn't need. "He writes small and eats alone, pays with new bills, and watches the door while he chews." Boone paid for the oats and didn't take them. He walked to the edge of town and looked toward the broken line of rock where the shack leaned into shade. The sky had the hard shine of a kettle lid. Far out, a coyote voiced once and quit. He checked the rifle, not because it needed it, but because a man does better with his hands busy. Vern brings the brag. Dee brings the blade. Clay keeps the ledger. Together they make a thing that walks like a man and isn't. "All right," Boone said to the road. "We'll cut it in 3. He swung into the saddle and aimed the bay for Sage Rim. The plan wasn't complicated. It didn't have to be. First you see, then you take. Then you carry what you can prove to a desk that won't move unless you make it." Boone rode the rim above the shack and learned it the way a man learns a hard trail, step by step until it tells him who it is. A lean-to hugged the cliff, a barrel by the door, 2 bedrolls, sometimes 3. A jug changed hands regular. The room went loud, then slow, then careless. 3 clinks on glass marked the sleepy part. A mutt tied to a post lifted his nose at scents that came straight, but not at the ones that slid down off the basalt slide to the west. That gave Boone his door. He counted the change of guards. Every 3 hours the man at the table traded places with the one by the door. The doorman always checked the lantern, trimmed the wick too low, then forgot it. Men set bad habits and call them routines. Boone wrote them in his head like scripture. Old Rafe met him where a mesquite made a crooked gate. "You'll want a sign," Rafe said. "Harmonica, 2 short breaths," Boone said. "Then stop. If you keep playing, they'll think there's more than coyotes out here." Rafe grinned with the side of his mouth. "They ain't the thinking kind. I'll be up high. If they run for the wash, I'll sing and move 'em back." Ramon Ortega came at first dark with a small canvas roll. Inside, a clean length of rawhide, a spare latch, a cold chisel, and a file. "You won't need 'em all," he said, "but men feel braver when pockets talk." He eyed Boone's shoulder. "You planning to kill anybody?" "I'm planning to collect proof," Boone said. "If proof fights me, I'll set it down." Ramon nodded. "Judge Malloy listens better to steel than to stories. Bring steel with a name on it." "Tansy will have the time," Boone said. "If the wire sings, we'll know when the wagons move." They took positions on a chalk map Boone had scratched in the dirt with a stick. Rafe on the ledge, Boone at the slide. Ramon drifting near the horses with a hand on a hobble strap in case a beast got bright. When the clinks came 3, Boone would go through the back. A man at the table would be slow from drink. A man at the door would be watching his own shadow. The mutt would be sniffing the wrong wind. Boone checked his rifle, then pulled a coil of cord from his saddlebag and wrapped it twice around his forearm. "If a girl's in there, I don't fire for show," he said. "I fire to cut the light. Dark scares loud men." Rafe nodded. "And your words?" Boone looked at the shack. "They get 1 sentence," he said. "Same as any thief gets." He rode home in a half circle so no one would read his day. The house waited like it always had. June stood by the stove, one hand around a cup. She didn't ask where he'd been. She didn't ask where he was going. "Doc came by," she said. "Left a little bottle. Said a drop, not a swallow." He set a loaf of bread on the table and a wedge of cheese wrapped in paper. "Good," he said. He poured a small coffee and set another cup beside it without looking at her. "I'll be out late." She studied his face the way a person measures a road by ruts. "You got to?" "I do." "Because of me?" "Because of them," he said, and because a man stands where it counts or he don't stand at all. She breathed once, steady. Come back. He touched the brim of his hat. I aim to. Outside, he cut the lantern wick on his porch and pocketed the stub, the kind that smokes when shot through. He slid a folded flour sack in behind his coat, the edges worn smooth by hands. Evidence is where you put it and what you carry out of a bad room. Sage Rim took the day and left the edges. Boone saddled the bay, checked the cinch twice, and swung up. He said the line once to hear it in the open, not loud, not for practice, more like a stake driven in the ground. She ain't yours. She never was. The gelding flicked an ear, ready. Boone put his knees to leather and rode for the slide, for the lean-to, for the clink of a bottle that turned men into slow targets. He wasn't a hero and didn't need to be. He needed to be right and careful and on time. The rest would come when it came. The shack leaned on the cliff like it needed the rock to keep it from falling. Boone waited by the basalt slide, counting bottle music. 1, 2, 3 clinks. Up on the rim, old Rafe let the harmonica breathe twice and go still. Down by the picket line, Ramon stood in the dark with a hand on a hobble strap, whispering to a skittish bay. Boone slid. Gravel whispered. The tied mutt lifted its nose to the straight wind and missed the man coming down curve. Inside, a chair scraped, a card slapped, a laugh that squeaked like a door Vern Pike never fixed. Boone eased to the back, palm on wood, breath steady. The lantern's flicker showed through a crack. He set his hat brim with a thumb, wrapped his left forearm with the cord, and went. The door took one hard boot and gave up. Vern came up too fast and caught the butt of the Winchester square in the sternum. He sat down without meaning to. A second man went for his belt. Boone fired once through the lantern, not the man. Glass blew, hot oil hissed. The room fell into smoke and sparks. Loud men turned quiet real quick. Hands high, Boone said, voice flat. Now. D. Larkin's knife flashed and then clattered. Even in the half-dark, Boone could see the bad weld, bubbled and mean-looking, weak where it bragged. D's breath came hard. He set both palms on the table. Cards shook like little flags. In the corner, a girl tried to be smaller than a blanket. Boone stepped to her without taking the rifle off the men. He dropped his duster over her shoulders and pulled the blanket close, tight enough to tell her someone finally knew how. Up, he told Vern. Slow. Vern's laugh tried to crawl out and died. Boone kicked a chair toward him. Sit, don't blink wrong. Rafe's harmonica ghosted once outside, just enough to say the wash was watched. Ramon coughed near the horses, easy and harmless, the kind of sound a night makes when no bad thing's happening at all. Boone moved the rifle with his eyes more than the barrel. D, he said, push that blade here with your boot. D did, the knife coming like a sorry thought. Boone trapped it with his heel, bent, and scooped it with the rag he'd brought for just that purpose. He set it in his coat like an appointment. He swept the table with his free hand and found a folded slip pinned under a bottle ring. Warehouse rate code, date wrong by 2 days, initials that didn't belong to decent work. He slid it into the same pocket. Listen close, he said, and the room leaned in. She ain't yours. She never was. You touch another girl, I come back different. Nobody answered. Smoke from the shot smelled like burnt coffee and old tin. Boone took the girl's arm, gentle at the elbow. She wouldn't meet his eyes. She didn't have to. They backed to the door. Vern twitched and thought better. Dee stared at a place on the wall where men keep the parts of themselves they don't want found. Outside, the mutt whined once. Ramon had the horses quiet as Sunday. Boone lifted the girl up to the saddle front and swung on behind her, his coat making a wall against the night. Rafe's 2-breath signal came again from higher up, clear road. Boone turned the bay. He didn't look back, but he felt the shack watching him. and something in that watch had numbers in it, not rage. Clay Matters was tall in the dark without being there, the way a ledger is present when the man who writes it is 3 miles off. Boone set his knees and rode. The girl folded into his arm the way a bird hides in brush. Behind them, the shack coughed once as the lantern died for good. Ahead, the flats left them alone, long enough to get gone. He spoke once for her and for anyone listening. "It's over for tonight," he said. "That's enough." They went to town at first light, the girl wrapped in Boone's duster and holding a cup with both hands, like it might run off if she didn't. Rafe walked the boardwalk ahead and opened the door. Sheriff Emmett Shaw looked up and put a crease in the morning with his eyes. Boone set things down in order, not drama. Knife first, wrapped in rag, a folded slip with a warehouse code and the wrong date, then the blanket corner he'd cut free where a bottle ring had pinned it. Last, he eased the girl into the chair by the stove, near the coffee heat. Shaw didn't touch the knife. "What am I seeing?" "Steel with a cold weld," Boone said. "Ramon will name the hand. Paper that calls people freight. A date that floats 2 days off the bell." Doc Ada Merrill came in like she'd been waiting on the step. She washed, warmed her hands over the stove ring, and checked the girl with the kind of quiet that steadies a room. Pulse, pupils, the wrist where wire had bit, the places the sun had burned. She wrote 3 lines on a receipt slip and signed it plain. A. Merrill, M.D. "Alive," she said. "Tired. Hurt. She'll talk when she can afford the price of it." Ramon Ortega arrived from the forge with his apron still on and turned the knife in paper without smudging himself to it. "This bead is wrong," he told Shaw. "D. Larkin does this kind of prideful mess. I've fixed his temper more than once. I'll say it the same under oath." The telegraph door clicked. Tansy Miller stood there with her ledger hugged to her ribs. "I keep times," she said. "Wire sang 7:42 last night from a no-name stop. Our bell struck 7:38. 4 minutes west to east drift matches the mountain line. Code read X-Live. I didn't write the full word." She set a small torn page on the desk and kept her eyes on the hinge of the door. Not the men. Rafe shifted his weight. "I heard 'em," he told the sheriff. "Vern's laugh. D's knife on stone. New stock," said like they were bragging over a horse that never had a choice. Place was the shack under Sage Rim. Shaw rubbed his mustache once, slow. He lifted the knife with a handkerchief, looked at the bead, and set it back like it stung. He read the slip, read Ada's note, glanced at Tansy's time, and let something in his shoulders change shape. "All right," he said. "I can move on this." He pulled a blank and wrote neat, the way he did most things. Search and seizure. Premises known as Turkey Shack, Sage Rim, to take into custody any person found holding women by force. To seize articles described, knives altered, papers coded X-Live, ledgers, ropes, brands. To transport same to the Sun Mesa office. He signed E. Shaw, sheriff, and sanded it dry. "Posse limited," he said. "2 of mine, you 3. We go quiet. We bring back breathing men and the book that keeps their courage up." Boone nodded. "Their courage lives in numbers. We'll take that." Shaw poured coffee into 2 cups and set one by the girl's hand. "Miss, you're safe in this room. That's the first promise." He looked at Boone. "You keep her at your place until Doc says town won't spook her. I'll post a man near your line tonight." Boone tipped his hat. "I'll sit the other side of that line." Shaw folded the warrant and slid it into a leather cover. "Bring me something I can stand on in court," he said. Boone picked up the knife in its rag and the paper with the wrong day. He tucked both inside his coat where his ribs would remember them. "You will," he said. The house took them back like it had been holding a place. Boone set the girl from the shack on the bed for an hour, while Ada checked her again, then sent Rafe to ride the line and Ramon to the forge for fresh hinges. When the chores spun down, the rooms felt different, not bigger, truer. June rose slow and steady, the color back in her some. She asked for a brush, not a mirror. Out by the corral she ran bristles along the mare's neck until dust made a small cloud and settled. The mare dropped her head and blew soft, as if they'd met before on a better day. Boone carried a short crate to the door and set a pair of near-new boots on top. Narrow heels, good stitching, not his size by a country mile. Widow Bell sent these, he said they were waiting on the right feet. June looked at them the way a person looks at a step that isn't high anymore. She sat, tugged them on, and stood. The leather found her shape quick. She didn't smile big. She just walked to the threshold, turned, and left the boots by the jam like she meant to come back for them every time she crossed that line. He found seed and an old trowel in the shed. Behind the house, the ground gave easy where washwater had leaked for years. June pressed sprigs into the soil, mint, a little sage, 2 stubborn onions that had tried to sprout in the bin. She worked with her palms, not the tool, as if something in the earth wanted skin to skin. By noon, Boone had the porch leveled so it didn't gripe as much. He fixed the back latch to take a peg, not just a wish. He set 2 cups on the table and filled both, half measures. They drank without ceremony. She wiped her mouth with the back of a hand and set her cup beside his, rims touching. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not asking me to say things I can't afford yet." He nodded once. "We'll pay when we're able." Afternoon slid along. She swept the floor with a willow broom that had seen better years and hummed once, not a tune he knew, a line and a turn, and then nothing. He patched a saddle skirt and checked loads. He rubbed a spot from the rifle's bolt until metal showed honest under the stain. Toward dark, Rafe came in from the south, face like a map folded wrong. "Saw that nicked shoe again," he said. "One rider, kept to the low. Didn't crowd your fence, but he measured it." "Where?" "Right where your cottonwoods shadow the trough." Rafe lowered his voice, though there was no one to hear. "He wanted you to know he knows the way." Boone walked the yard before the lamps were lit. A loop of baling wire lay where no wire had any business. A rail had fresh sap where a hand had worried it. At the gate, gravel showed a toe drag and the flake mark from that same chipped shoe. He set his boot beside it and looked long until the shapes told him what they could. Inside, June stood by the stove, waiting without fidget. "Bad news?" "Just news." He slid the bar across the door and eased the shade down without snapping it. He put the duster across the chair nearest the entrance and the Winchester within an arm's fall. He tore a strip from a flour sack and wrapped it over the latch to deaden the click. Small things keep a house from telling all it knows. They ate simple. Broth with bread in it. Bacon to argue with the broth. He gave her the better piece without saying so. After, he stepped out to the porch and watched the yard hold its shape. Somewhere out there, a chain shifted on iron and then went still. That was all. He slept in the chair with his hat over his eyes and woke twice to nothing that changed his mind. At first light, he walked the fence alone. The prints from the night showed up like handwriting he'd seen before. The horse had stopped where a man could look in and count windows. The rider had stood there long enough to roll a smoke, then ground the butt under his heel and left north along the wash. Boone came back and found June at the table with both cups ready. She had braided her hair with a piece of thread and tied the ends down so the day wouldn't undo it. "You going out?" she asked. "Soon. Then I'll keep the stove honest and the door smarter than it was yesterday." "That'll do." He set his palm over the boots by the jamb, felt the polish under the dust as if it held a pulse. A house can be a line a man draws and keeps. Some lines are wood, some are promise. He meant to hold both. He took the rifle and the paper with the wrong date and put them where a man keeps his reasons. The yard lay quiet as a held breath, but the ground had spoken. It said the next part was coming, and it wasn't far. Dusk put a tin lid on the day. Boone checked the latch, set the Winchester where his hand would know it, and took one breath that meant, ready. The first shot came thin over the sheep pen. High, meant to scare. A second walked down the rails and spit a chip from a post. Boone hit the porch in 2 steps, rolled the rifle to his shoulder, and cut a splinter off the corner brace 3 feet from where the muzzle flash had winked. Wood jumped. Somebody cursed. "Back out," Boone called steady. "This place don't take visitors after dark." Vern Pike squeaked a laugh he couldn't help. "Just saying howdy, Callahan." "Howdy's done in daylight," Boone said. Another shadow slid along the fence. Long stride, hat low, not D. The man fired once toward the roofline and hit nothing worth the powder. From inside the house came the clang of a pot. The kettle skidded off the ring. June had ducked fast and sent it flying. Steam roped up and hid the window. The unknown flinched at the noise like he wasn't built for kitchens, then scuttled to the cottonwoods. Boone planted a second round into the same post. Lower, the bullet chewed bark and made the message plainer. "Next one writes its name in a man," he said. Quiet held. Hoof iron ticked once, then twice, moving off. Vern couldn't leave without a parting word. "You ain't alone out here, Callahan." Boone worked the lever and let it close. "Neither are you, that's your trouble." They were gone. The pen settled. The gelding in the corral blew and put his head down. Boone stepped inside. June stood by the stove, both hands on the table, boots planted like a new fence. "You hurt?" he asked. "No." She looked at the pot on the floor. "That was me." "That pot saved us a bullet," Boone said, and set it upright. He wiped the ring, put the kettle back, and tamped the fire to behave. Small chores make a room believe in itself again. Old Rafe came at full dark, dust on his shoulders. "Found where they sleep their stock," he said. "Little pocket under sage rim, 3 pickets, grain sacks stashed up a rock shelf." "Sign?" Boone asked. Rafe tugged a square of cloth from his vest. It had a stitched letter in the corner, small and plain. M. Tore off a neckerchief on a nailhead, he said. Man didn't notice he left his initial behind. "Matters," Boone said. Rafe nodded. "Saw that chipped shoe again, too. Same track from your south fence. He measured you earlier. Tonight he let Vern make the noise." Boone thumbed the frayed edge of the cloth. "Clay keeps his hands clean. He won't much like that, this says otherwise." Rafe poured himself a swallow from the dipper. "What now?" "Now we turn their habit on 'em," Boone said. 3 clinks, lantern low, dog tied wrong side of the wind. We go make the shack honest." He looked at June. "You'll have a deputy on the line. I'll be the other one." June's eyes held steady. "Bring back the book that lets them count girls like cattle." "That's the plan." Rafe set his harmonica on the table, the same one he used for the 2-breath sign, and tapped it once with a fingernail. "I'll sing from the ridge. Push 'em where you want 'em." Boone checked the rifle again. The sky over the rim had a hard, cold shine, the kind a man rides under when there's work to finish and not much talk left to do it with. He folded the cloth with the stitched M and laid it beside the knife with the bad weld and the slip with the wrong date, proof lining up like fence posts before a stretch. "Tomorrow we go quiet," he said. "Tonight we sleep with our boots closer than we like." June picked up the fallen lid and set it true. "I'll keep the stove honest," she said. "You keep the door." "That's the bargain." Boone sat the porch till the yard took the shape it should. Out by the cottonwoods something shifted and then decided against it. He let the dark run down. When he finally closed his eyes, it wasn't for long. Dawn would bring a saddle, a short ride, and a ledger a man could hold up to a judge without shame. Sage Rim held its shadow like a saved coin. Boone, Rafe, and Ramon were there before first light, where the basalt made a narrow throat and the trail pinched a man into a choice. Ramon set a spare latch on the corral gate and loosened one picket rope just enough to talk a horse into trouble later. Rafe lay up high with his rope coiled and the harmonica ready for 2 soft breaths if things split wrong. "Clay comes to count," Boone said. "He'll carry the book because it makes him brave." They waited the way old hands wait, still nothing to prove. Morning put a pale edge on the rock. A wagon wheel whispered, "One rider." "Careful!" The horse showed the nicked hind shoe like a signature and stepped into the pocket under the rim. Clay matters slid down. Clean boots, coat that hadn't seen a day's work. A satchel hung cross-body like a preacher's. He checked the lean-to door, then the barrel, then the table where men forget their plans. He pulled the satchel forward and lifted out a ledger bound in cheap leather, thumbed a page with a neatness that said everything about him. "Morning, Clay," Boone said, stepping from the rock. Clay didn't start. He turned slow and showed palms. "Callahan," he said, "you're out early." "Early is when paper gets its courage," Boone said. "Set that down." Clay smiled like a man practicing. "You think that book matters more than the men who carry it?" "I think it makes the men who carry it," Boone said. Clay's right hand twitched toward his coat. Boone saw the twitch and moved, but Clay was faster than his polish said. The pistol barked once. Heat tore Boone high across the shoulder and spun him half a step. He kept his feet because keeping them was the job. Rafe's rope snapped from the rim, clean as a whip crack. It caught Clay's gun arm at the elbow and jerked him wide. The shot went into rock. Ramon slapped the loosened picket. 2 horses surged and banged the gate, shoving the corral into noise. Clay lunged to run, but the rope checked him long enough for Boone to cross the yard. Boone hit him once with his left, solid and short. Clay folded, not dramatic, just wrong-footed. The ledger skidded, flipped open, and laid its own insides out. Columns, dates, marks, the neat hand of a man who puts a price on breath. Clay kicked, rolled, and came up mean, eyes small now that the paper wasn't in his hands. He threw a fist and got a forearm, threw another and got air. Boone drove him into the doorframe and felt the shoulder fire again, bright and sick. Clay slid low, left the pistol, and squirmed free like a lizard. He took the gap Ramon had made, dove for the corral, and found the gate heavier than it looked. He went over instead of through, boots slipping on the top rail, and hit ground running. Rafe's rope missed by a hand's width. The nicked shoe lit out up the cut and was gone like a debt in a bad year. Ramon caught Boone by the good arm and looked at the blood. "You stand?" "I stand," Boone said, breath even because he made it be. "Tie that gate proper, then bring me the book." They took the ledger to the table. Boone wrapped his shoulder with a torn strip from his shirt and set the knot where it wouldn't fight the rifle later. He flipped pages slow. Names were rare. Codes were not. Xliv repeated like a habit. Places marked with a letter and a number. Dates stacked wrong against church bells. A mark he knew too well sat by certain lines. 2 crooked T's done like a child carved them. Rafe pointed with a clean finger. "There." Boone read it twice. "Thu, shack, 3. Another hand had added a small M at the margin, delicate as a signature a man keeps hidden. "Thursday," Ramon said. "Turkey shack, 3. Boone closed the ledger and felt the weight change in his hand. Paper can be a weapon if a judge is willing to load it. He slid the book into the flour sack he'd brought for just that reason and tied it with rawhide. "You're leaking," Rafe said. "I'll leak later," Boone said. "Right now we ride straight to Shaw." Ramon nodded toward the cut where Clay had gone. "He won't toss that book again." "He won't have to," Boone said. "We've got it. He'll come looking to fix what's broke with something worse." They doused the ruts with a brush drag and set the latch the way it had been. Boone took one look around. Lantern, table, the chair Vern liked, the scuffed mark where Dee's knife had kissed wood for show. A bad room keeps score until someone makes it tell. Rafe gave the two-breath note, low and clean. They moved out, Boone in the middle now because the blood made a small, steady pattern down his sleeve. He didn't hurry. Hurrying wastes a man. He rode like a man carrying a piece of the law that still needed a desk. At the edge of town, Widow Bell stepped from her doorway and saw the red. She didn't ask. She held out a clean towel and a threadbare scarf. Boone took the towel, shoved it under the bandage, and nodded thanks. The scarf went around the sack to keep the cover from catching eyes. They crossed to the sheriff's with the ledger under Boone's arm, and the morning getting bright enough to show a judge what words were worth. He set his jaw against the pane and felt the corners of it settle in a way that had nothing to do with pride. "Proof," he said, mostly to himself. "On the desk." Rafe touched his shoulder, light as a moth. And then? Boone looked at the sack. "Then we go back and count right. Judge Malloy didn't need every page. 2 lines and the way Boone bled through his shirt were enough." Shaw stacked the ledger on the warrant, tapped both square, and said, "We ride." They came at gray light, 2 deputies, Boone, Rafe, Ramon, moving the long way around so the shack would wake thinking the world was ordinary. Up high, Rafe took his ledge. Down low, Ramon drifted for the picket line, whispering to a raw-boned dun that liked to tell on men. Inside, a bottle clinked once, twice, then the 3rd time that turns bluff into yawn. Boone felt the shoulder light with pain and set it aside where it couldn't vote. He gave the 2-breath signal with a cupped hand. No music, just air. He hit the back with his boot and let the door make the speech. The deputies slid in like they'd practiced in a room with chalk lines. D. Larkin snatched for that ugly knife and found Boone's barrel already writing no across his chest. Vern Pike got halfway to a laugh and swallowed it wrong. "Warrant," one deputy said, voice steady, hands flat, move slow. Dee's blade kissed the table and stayed. The weld looked worse in daylight. Boone wrapped it in a rag and put it away like a kept promise. He lifted a lid on a crate, rope cut into lengths, a brand iron with a double T, scorched new. He nodded once and set both on the floorboards where a judge could see them without squinting. The corner shivered. 2 girls, hair hacked short, eyes big in faces gone to angles. Boone set his rifle against his thigh and crouched low enough to be human. "You're leaving," he said. "Right now." Ramon came through the door with 2 coats, an old shawl, and a skin of water. He got the girls wrapped and standing. One wouldn't look at anybody. The other kept her gaze on Boone like a puppy that had learned to count feet. He nodded to both like there was time in the world for manners. "Read it to 'em," Rafe called down. "Make the words stick." The deputy read the paper in a slow voice that carried premises known as Turkey Shack, seizure of persons holding women by force, seizure of knives altered, papers coded ex-live, ledgers, ropes, brands. Dee stared at the near wall and tried to look bored. Vern got small where he sat. Boone circled the room with a flour sack, taking what the law had asked for. Rate slips, a stub of pencil with a flattened point, the brand iron, the rope. He kicked a chair leg and a small book slid out, the side ledger, numbers written in a rush. He bagged that too. "Cuffs," Shaw's deputy said. Dee flinched like a man who finally discovered metal comes 2 ways in this world. The kind you swing and the kind that holds. Vern put his wrists back without being asked twice. Rafe's rope dropped over a 3rd shape, trying to ooze through the gap where the wall didn't meet the rock. That one came up sputtering and came along quiet. Boone stepped to the door and said the line again, so the room would remember what had happened here and why. "She ain't yours. She never was. Any of 'em." No one answered. The truth had filled the place to the rafters. There wasn't room for talk. They walked the girls to the shade. Ramon lifted one onto the buckboard. Rafe took the other. Boone kept the sack tight and the rifle open, eyes on the cut where trouble liked to travel. His shoulder ached in a clean, honest way that told him it would still be his tomorrow. A deputy blew dust from the warrant and tapped it against his palm. "We done?" "We started," Boone said. From far off came the lazy roll of a heavy wheel, iron on rock, then iron on dirt. It wasn't the rhythm of a ranch rig. It was a freight man's beat, steady, guarded, full of counting. Clay matters. Rafe heard it the same second and touched the brim of his cap. Toward the north cut, Ramon's eyes went to the horses. The deputies shifted so their badges would catch morning and not look like a dare. Boone set the flour sack behind the bench seat, where wood would keep it from falling and law would keep it from being taken. He climbed onto the bay and rolled his shoulder to make sure it would come when called. "Get them young ones to town," he told Rafe without looking away from the sound. "Doc first, Shaw next, every scrap on the desk." Rafe nodded. "You riding to meet him?" "I'm riding to meet the bookkeeper that forgot paper weighs more than lead," Boone said. The wagon note lifted once on a rise, then settled into a pull. Boone put his knees to leather and turned for the cut. Behind him, the shack sagged like a lie caught in public. In front, the trail narrowed to the kind of width that makes a man tell the truth, one way or the other. Clay Matters came around the bend with his team held neat and the reins pinched like pen lines. Boone eased out where the trail squeezed down to one wagon wide. "Morning, Clay," he said. "Town's expecting you." Clay weighed the road, the brush, the way Boone sat easy with a rifle he didn't have to point. He tried a smile. "You got no paper on me." "Paper's already in town," Boone said. "Drive." Clay studied Boone's shoulder where the shirt was dark and decided against bold ideas. He clucked to the team and rolled. Boone rode beside, not close, not far, close enough to keep a man honest. Ironwood Ridge had gathered itself by the courthouse like a church before service. Shaw waited on the steps with two deputies. Judge Malloy stood inside under a wall map, glasses in his hand. The ledger and the side book lay on the table with the knife in its rag, the brand iron, the code slips, and Ada's neat note clipped on top. Shaw lifted a palm. "Clay Matters. You're under arrest for conspiracy to confine and traffic women by force." The cuffs spoke the only argument they needed to. Malloy sat, squared the ledger, and nodded once. "Let's hear it." Tansy Miller went first. She kept her voice steady and let the facts stack. "Wire struck 7:42 from a blind stop. Our bell struck 7:38. Code X-Live. I logged both times." She held up the ledger page where she'd copied the drift figures. "I can swear to it." Ramon Ortega set the wrapped blade on the edge of the table and unrolled it to show the bubble scar bead. "That weld's cold. I've mended this man's mess before, D. Larkin. He files the spine to catch light. It's his habit." Malloy leaned in, looked, and grunted his understanding. Doc Ada Merrill spoke 3 sentences that filled the room. "Wire cuts, sun damage, stress weight loss. That girl did not walk to that shack of her own will." She signed the slip again for show, then stepped back. Rafe Monahan told what his ears had held. Vern's laugh. Dee's knife on stone. New stock. Dead Man Wash carried it good. I can set you on the ledge I was on, and you'll hear the same shape of things. Boone laid out the rest like fence posts on a straight line, the nicked shoe at his south fence and again at Sage Rim, the cloth square stitched with an M torn on a nail, the crate rope cut to lengths, the brand iron with the double T scorched recent. He turned the ledger to Thu Shack 3 and showed the little margin mark a careful man thought no one would notice. "Numbers make brave men out of cowards," he said. take the numbers and they get small. Malloy tapped the ledger with a knuckle. Matters. Clay tried a new smile and found it fit worse than the first. Inventory, Judge. Freight. Nothing illegal about counting. Counting people like cattle is illegal enough for me, Malloy said. He set his glasses on his nose and read one line, then another, then the date that didn't match the church bell. His jaw moved slow. Sheriff, book him. Hold Larkin and Pike. I'll set a full hearing at first light tomorrow. Clay leaned toward Boone as they turned him. You think paper saves you? Boone looked at the cuffs. Paper saves them, he said. That's the point. The deputies moved the three men through the side door. The room let out a breath it didn't know it had been holding. Shaw signed the log and slid it to Malloy. The judge capped his pen with care a man reserves for small, important endings. We're not done yet, he said, but we have begun. Outside, the street took back its usual sound. Boone stepped to the doorway and stood a moment, feeling the weight of the ledger gone from under his arm, and the weight of something better taking its place. He touched his shoulder and found the bandage holding. Across the square, Widow Bell lifted 2 fingers from her apron pocket. You did it, but don't forget to eat. Boone tipped his hat to no one in particular. He had a mile of road and a porch to sit, a stove to keep honest, and a pair of boots by a jam that meant someone planned on coming back through that door. He started that way, steady, like a man who'd finally put proof where talk used to be. Boone came home slow, not from doubt, just because a man ought to meet his own gate with both feet under him. The yard held steady. The mare nosed the rail. June was out back by the little strip of green, hands in the dirt like she was greeting an old friend. Mint showed itself. 2 onion tops had decided the world wasn't all bad. He set his hat on the peg and let the house take his weight. Ada came by before sundown, changed the bandage, said the wound would argue for a week, and then, hush. Keep it clean, she told him, and don't lift more than your share. Boone told her he'd try and meant it less than he said. June rinsed a tin and set it beside another on the table. He poured coffee into both, thin and easy. They stood a while, not clinking, just letting heat do what talking couldn't. On the jamb by the door, the near-new boots waited where she'd left them, toes aimed inside as if they'd learned the way. He took the folded burlap from behind the crate, the same sack he'd cut down at the wash, and trimmed it into narrow ties. June watched without speaking. He handed her the strips, and she fastened the mint to a thin stick so it wouldn't fall over in the first rough day. Trouble had been a container once. Now it held something worth keeping. That seemed about right. After dark, they sat on the step, coffee warm in their hands. No big sky talk, no vows. The pump creaked once and settled. A night bird called and thought better of it. Boone could feel the house thinking with them. Boards easing where men had leaned too long. The stove letting go of its last bit of day. She said it quiet, like a person testing a step she hoped would hold. Why'd you come back for me? He took a breath that didn't need hiding. Because someone had to. She nodded and looked down at her hands, at the burlap threads caught there, at the faint line on her wrist where clean cloth had been. That's enough, she said. It sounded like a prayer, small and complete. Morning rose plain. 2 cups stood ready without anyone giving an order. Boone ate his side of bread. She finished hers and glanced toward the corral, like she had somewhere to be that wasn't running. He handed her a brush. She took it and went. The telegraph would carry a notice. Shaw would have men to move and a judge to face at first light. The ledger would sit on a table that didn't budge for boasting. That was their work. This here was Boone's. Keep the stove honest. The latch smarter than yesterday. The door open to the right people and shut to the wrong ones. A ranch can be a fence line and still be a kind of church. Toward evening, June came to the threshold, and set her boots just inside, like she'd done on the first day they fit. She stepped out, then back in, as if to tell the jam she'd learned its measure. Boone didn't speak. He didn't need to. Some lives don't come back with trumpets. They come back the way rain takes to old wood, slow, patient, finding all the cracks and making them useful. If you're lucky, you hear it and don't mistake it for something else. If this tale sat right with you, if it reminded you that proof matters and decent hands still count, drop a simple one so I know you were here by the fire. And if you've got room for more stories with grit and a true heart, go on and subscribe. We'll keep a cup warm. The road is long and there are more miles to tell. When the night gets long and the porch boards settle, that's when a man can hear what his day was worth. Maybe it was only a fence mended right, a stove kept honest, a door left a little open for the good kind of company. Maybe it was standing where it counted and saying the plain word out loud, so silence didn't win. That's enough for most lives. It was enough for Boone and June. If this story sat easy with you, like rain taking to old wood, leave a small sign so I know you were here by the fire. A quiet one down below is plenty. And if you'd like more trails like this, law before fury, proof before boasting, a second cup waiting on the table, go on and subscribe. I'll keep a chair pulled out and the coffee warm. The road is long and we'll ride it together, one steady mile at a time.